Hey guys, Tom here, and it's time to review the album from In Writing called While You Were Away.
I never really seem to say what's on my mind.
So I kind of want to start this album review out with a little bit of personal history in terms of my musical taste. So back in the early 2000s when the whole emo scene was going on, when any kind of indie rock band was generally labeled as emo, by mainstream media, and people didn't really listen to those bands. And my taste at that time, I never really got into the more indie side of things or the more mellow side of things. I would say I was generally sticking with more hardcore influenced or punk influenced bands. I hate to admit this, but a lot of times I was listening to bands for the screaming and things like that. And as I've kind of grown and gotten older, my tastes have, I would say, thankfully evolved quite a bit to the point where I now do see the talent in these emotional rock bands, the ones that are generally on the more mellow side of things, the ones that definitely can hear maybe a punk influence here and there, but generally kind of tone things down a little bit and a little bit softer, not necessarily slower, not necessarily losing any of that energy, but just kind of more atmospheric, more methodical in their approach to things. And why I mention that is because of this album, While You Were Away by In Writing. Back then, I probably would have hated this album, and that's on me because that was where my music taste was at that time. And looking back at it, listening to this album today and realizing that, I really do love this album. I'm drawn to it. They have put out a fantastically done emotional album here, and it's generally is on the more mellow side of things. And that's kind of why I bring up my personal tastes back then in the beginning, because that's something that really never appealed to me so much before I really kind of gave it a chance. I've never really given albums like this a chance until I would say fairly recently, and I'm really glad I have. While You're Away starts off with this very, very mellow, kind of slow, calming, atmospheric intro track where you just kind of hear this like sampling, and then get the simple guitar, and then everything kind of kicks in at once, and you get this pretty awesome song, and then it goes right into their following song called Chelsea, and it's this upbeat but emotionally charged song. And what's nice about it, one thing I like about it, is that once you kind of think the song is kind of winding down and getting slower and probably going to end, it kicks right back up again and just hits you with that energetic music they have going on. And then you have the song Leeward, which actually really reminds me of Silverstein a lot without the screaming. That's kind of the band that comes to mind when I listen to that song, and they were one of those bands back in the early 2000s which were generally labeled as emo, and they kind of are on the post-hardcore emo side of things, but never really truly emo. But the song Leeward does, feels like that, except more kind of stripped down, and again without the screams and things like that, but it's still a very kind of energetic song on its own. And overall, this album kind of does harken back to those early 2000 days, probably, but again more stripped down and not as hardcore influenced as a lot of those bands were that were labeled as emo, kind of more influenced by, I would say, early actual emo bands like American Football or Sunny Day Real Estate, kind of minus the grungy side that Sunny Day Real Estate had at times. It is an emotional album. You've listened to the actual lyrics, dealing with a lot of things of just kind of bearing your soul to somebody and stuff like that. Now, it is a fairly short album. It is only about 7 songs long. I yet to find a song that I don't particularly enjoy. They all kind of have their ups and downs, but overall I do like the songs that they've put out on this album. It still feels a little bit rough around the edges, not in terms of production, which is definitely there, but kind of just in the way of songwriting. It seems like these guys have a ton of talent going on, and it feels like they could push themselves to do a little bit more than on this album. It's a little bit straightforward, but that's about as negative as I can get with this album, to be honest. I mean, that's really the only thing I could say about it. This is something you'd like as far as that, like I said, that calmer, mellow more emotional side of indie rock, this is definitely something that you should check out. I did get to see this band live. Actually, that was my real first experience with them. I knew about them from releasing their album Through All Sounds, and I went to the show that featured Hodera and also the Stolen Jars, which I reviewed previously. And when In Writing got up, I was very surprised by them, to the point where I'll say this, at live shows, I'm kind of that guy that will record the shows because I like to relive them afterwards. I know some people find that to be annoying, or, why are you watching the show through your camera, whatever. That's something that I just like personally. That's just how I experience shows, and I like to capture that experience and experience them later. That said, generally speaking, if I like something, I'm going to record it. Especially if it's my first time seeing a band, and especially if it's something I know I'm probably going to go see this band again, which is the case with In Writing. And I did break out my camera, and I filmed quite a few of their songs on their set, which you can also find up on my channel here. They put out a fantastic show. I was pumped watching them, standing there. Like I said, it was kind of a small crowd for the show, but everyone there was totally into In Writing. They really did command the stage very well. And the reason I kind of want to bring up their live performance is because while they are very, like I said, describe them as kind of mellow and atmospheric on the album, live shows are completely a different beast here. Oftentimes the band that comes to mind when I think about the difference between live shows and albums is Taking Back Sunday, who on their albums really don't come off as that energetic, or I don't want to use the word hardcore, but like they don't seem like they go that hard on their records. But then if you've ever seen Taking Back Sunday live, it's a crazy show. I mean, it's nuts. You should see them. Even if you're not really a Taking Back Sunday fan, their shows are amazing. And that's why I want to talk about In Writing, because generally how I feel about them, their album, so much, while everything is very well done on the album, doesn't come off as quite energetic as they do in their live shows. And like I said, my only real point of criticism for them, I would like to see some of that energy from their live shows kind of transferred into their albums. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not trying to put the band down or anything like that. The album's fantastic on its own, but it's just that difference between hearing them live and then going to the album and just kind of feeling a little bit different about it, that's kind of something I wanted to talk about a little bit, because there are a lot of bands like that, and I think In Writing is one of them, and I feel like they really could capture that magic of that live show and put it on an album, and I would love to see that on their next album, which, again, probably gathered from this review, I'm really looking forward to, because this is I know it's not their first album. They did have another one that I don't think was on an actual label called Tabula Rasa, and I believe they also had like a split as well. But this is kind of, I believe, their first album that they're actually releasing on a label, All Sounds, and I think it's a great start for them for being on the label. And again, I'm highly anticipating whatever they have to follow this up with. So lastly, I just want to say, if you are interested in some deep, energetic, emotional rock music, this is something that you should kind of check out. I'll use the word energetic, it is also at the same time on the calmer side of things. You're not going to find any screaming or punk beats or any kind of hardcore tropes on here. They're not that kind of band. They're definitely more on the indie rock side of things on the emotional scale. If that's something that you find that you will enjoy, I highly recommend checking out In Writing. And they're up on Bandcamp. You can definitely get their album, and if you're in the local area, definitely go see one of their shows if you can. So lastly, the thing I kind of want to go back and talk about for this review is that this review actually has taken me a long time to write and to actually get out. I've been kind of putting it off for a few weeks now, because I don't really know what quite to say. Like I said, I'm not really somebody who was into that indie emotional rock growing up, and I'm just starting to kind of get into it, so it's kind of difficult for me to talk about bands like this often, because I feel like I'm not giving them a chance, or not explaining myself right, or coming off as being too critical of them. And I don't want to give that impression, because I do really like this band, and I am starting to let myself enjoy indie rock. And I know that sounds weird that I'm letting myself do that, as if, you know, before I was kind of stopping myself, but I really was. Like I said, I kind of shied away from these simply because it wasn't something I was into, and I felt like I shouldn't be into it. I felt like I had to be more into kind of like hardcore stuff, and, you know, hard rock influenced and punk influenced things, versus this calmer side of the scale here. So I just want to say that, you know, that's kind of why this has taken me so long. That's kind of where my head is at this time, as I was doing this review, and kind of where it comes from. And it also kind of leads to me to what I'm going to talk about with another video, why I don't actually do review scores. And this album and another album I'm going to be talking about soon are kind of part of why I don't believe in review scores, and why I really don't give them out so much. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to my channel if you like what you see, and if you have anything you want me to review, any comments about what you think I fucked up or did well, you know, always leave them down below. I love hearing from you guys.